wow, this earthquake that just hit Myanmar has really got me thinking, A 7.7 magnitude, that's enormous. And hitting the Saigang region on March 28th, it was a shallow one too, just 10 kilometers deep. So, I mean, you can just imagine the kind of damage, landslides, ground shifts, and those mountainous border areas. They must have been hit so hard. It's the kind of story that really sticks with you.
Yeah, it's those headlines, they grab you, but then you start thinking about the people there. Like, what does it actually mean for them? That's what we're going to try to unpack today, right? Going beyond just the numbers and the initial reports.
Exactly. And luckily, we have a unique perspective to help us do that. We're going to be looking at a reflection by Pastor Lumaf titled, and get ready for this.
Okay, so for our listeners who don't happen to speak Burmese, what does that mean?
Right, of course. Well, it translates to reflections on the struggle of saints showing love in what is often referred to as the end times, seen through the lens of the Myanmar earthquake. The idea of end times is a theological concept, often referring to a period of increased hardship and moral decline. And that really frames Pastor Lumaf's perspective on the challenges of showing love in this kind of situation. And what's really powerful about his writing is it's not just about the earthquake itself. It's about, well, it makes you think about what it means to help others when things are this bad.
It's like he's examining those struggles, right? Both the internal ones and the external challenges that come with trying to provide aid in a disaster like this. It's complicated.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do today is, well, we want to understand what happened, the earthquake's impact, the struggles of the people there, especially those who are already vulnerable.
Yeah.
And those trying to help them. And, we want to think about those bigger questions, like how do we show love and support when everything feels like it's falling apart?
Okay, so let's dive in. Let's start with, well, where did this all happen? We know the epicenter was in the Sagaing region, but it seems like the damage was much more widespread.
Yeah, Mandalay province was hit pretty badly from what I understand. And then there are those refugee camps in the border mountain regions. They were already struggling, and then this earthquake on top of it all.
Right, and that's what Pastor Lumaf really highlights, that widespread impact. But then he brings in these specific reports from WIRI, that's a missions organization that's working in those areas. And their reports are, well, they're pretty devastating.
What are some of the details they shared?
Okay, so imagine this. The northern border mountain regions, these massive landslides come through and they wipe out everything. Farmland that was used by the refugee camps, storage warehouses with crucial supplies, gone. Just gone.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, and it gets worse. The mountain roads, which were already dangerous to begin with, they were completely blocked. So now you've got these communities that are completely cut off. They're isolated.
So it's not just the damage from the earthquake itself, it's like everything that comes after. It just makes the situation so much harder to deal with.
Right. And then you have the rain, the constant rainfall, that just adds another layer of danger. The ground is already unstable, then you get all that rain, and it increases the risk of even more landslides.
And I imagine the aftershocks weren't helping either.
No, not at all. They kept happening, these aftershocks. So you're already dealing with the aftermath of the earthquake, and then you feel the ground shaking again, and you just don't know what's going to happen next. It's this constant fear.
And on top of all that, there were communication issues, right?
Yeah, the communication networks, they were down. WIRI was relying on these emergency satellite phones. They only had limited contact. So can you imagine trying to coordinate any kind of rescue effort or aid delivery with that kind of limited communication?
It's just unimaginable. And I read that some of the WIRI missionaries were initially missing.
Yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty. People were worried, not knowing if their loved ones were safe. That kind of uncertainty, that just adds to the trauma of it all.
Absolutely. And this brings us to something that Pastor Lumaf calls the double tragedy. This is not just a natural disaster, but a tragic recurrence of human-caused suffering. What he's talking about is the fact that this earthquake hit a region that was already dealing with so much conflict.
It's like those border regions, they were already struggling. There's been internal conflict and displacement for years. So these communities were already vulnerable. And then the earthquake comes along, and it just makes everything so much worse.
So you have this natural disaster on top of an already really difficult situation. What did Pastor Lumaf say about the response in these areas? Was there any kind of aid getting through?
Well, that's where things get, a little complicated. He expresses a lot of concern about the lack of government aid reaching the border regions. He talks about what he sees as indifference from the military government. They're not providing rescue operations, they're not providing assistance. He feels like these people have been abandoned.
So the people in these refugee camps, they're left to deal with the aftermath of the earthquake on their own.
It seems that way, at least according to Pastor Lou Mathif. And these are people who were already struggling. We're talking about orphans, widows, the elderly. They don't have food. They don't have clean water. They're living in makeshift shelters. It's a desperate situation.
And this just adds to the tragedy, doesn't it? That on top of the earthquake, they're not even getting the help they need.
Absolutely. And it's made even more tragic by the fact that, well, in some of these border areas, there were reports of continued shelling on the very same day as the earthquake. So you have this natural disaster, and the conflict just keeps going.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that. But amidst all this darkness, Pastor Lumea also talks about the faith and the resilience he's witnessed. What did he see in those communities?
Yeah, it's actually quite inspiring. He talks about the local believers, the church communities. They're going through so much, but their faith is holding strong. They're supporting each other. They're sharing whatever food and resources they have. They're organizing shelters. It's like even in the face of all this devastation, they're finding a way to come together and help each other.
It really shows the power of community, doesn't it? And the importance of faith in times of crisis. And I know WIRI, the missions organization we mentioned earlier, they also stepped up to provide aid. What did their response look like?
They launched a humanitarian aid effort right away. They were trying to deliver essential supplies to the border regions: medicine, food, water, tents. But it wasn't easy.
I can imagine. With the roads blocked and everything.
Exactly. The logistics were a nightmare. The blocked roads. And then Pastor Lumaf also mentions military blockades. It was incredibly difficult to get the aid to where it was needed most.
It wasn't just the logistics that were dangerous. There was real risk involved for the people trying to deliver that aid.
You're right. Pastor Lumaf talks about individuals who were arrested for transporting aid supplies. They were just trying to help people, and they ended up being punished for it. It really highlights the risks that people are willing to take in these situations. And Pastor Lumaf sees their actions as a reflection of their faith, a way of serving Christ by serving others.
It's a powerful statement about the commitment and the selflessness that we see in these situations. And it leads into a really important part of Pastor Lumaf's reflection. He talks about the struggle of showing love in times of difficulty. He brings in these biblical perspectives, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, he's wrestling with these big ideas. He talks about the enduring nature of love, like how it's described in 1 Corinthians. But then he also brings up this verse from Matthew 24:1, which says, "Because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold." It's this idea that love can diminish, especially when we're surrounded by injustice and suffering.
So it's not that love disappears entirely, but it can kind of fade or maybe get buried under everything else that's going on.
Exactly. And he connects this to what he sees happening in the world today. You know, with all the injustice, the corruption, the moral decline, he feels like it can make people apathetic, like they become numb to the suffering of others.
And he uses an analogy to explain this, right?
Yeah.
Something about relationships.
Yeah, he talks about personal relationships. Like, if you're repeatedly hurt or betrayed by someone, it's natural for your feelings of love to diminish. It's like you build up these walls to protect yourself. And he applies this to the broader world. He's saying that constant exposure to injustice and suffering can have the same effect. It can make it harder to feel love and compassion.
So the challenge then, especially for people of faith, is how to maintain that love, that compassion, even when things are so difficult.
Exactly. It's about protecting that inner spark, that flame of love, and not letting it be extinguished by all the darkness in the world. It's a conscious effort.
And Pastor Lumov goes on to define what he believes true love actually is. And it's not just a feeling, right?
No, he sees it as a choice. He says love is a decision. It's rooted in rational thought. It's about sacrifice and commitment. It's not just about how you feel. It's about what you do.
So it goes beyond just those initial emotions. It's about acting on that love, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And he contrasts this with a more self-serving kind of love, where you only do things if you get something out of it. He talks about the importance of considering unseen rewards, spiritual rewards. It's about being guided by your faith, even when it costs you something.
And that decision to act on love, it's not just impulsive, is it? He talks about a process.
Oh, right. He says it starts with thinking rationally, understanding the situation, seeing what the needs are, and then it involves prayer. seeking guidance. And finally, it's about arriving at a conviction, a sense of knowing what the right thing to do is. It's a very deliberate process.
And then he moves into this really interesting discussion about different perspectives on aid. Because even within faith communities, there can be disagreements about whether and how to help in these kinds of situations.
Yeah, and I appreciate how he acknowledges that. He says there's no easy answer, people have different opinions, and that's okay. He recognizes the complexity of these situations.
But he does emphasize the importance of motivation, right?
Yes, absolutely. He says that the most important thing is that your decision, whether you choose to help or not, is rooted in your faith. It has to come from a genuine desire to do what you believe is right.
And he also talks about the power of love to overcome barriers. What does he mean by that?
Well, he believes that love, especially when it's grounded in faith and prayer, can break down those walls that we build up. It can overcome prejudice. It can challenge our preconceived notions. It's a powerful force for change.
But it's not about rushing in blindly, right?
Yeah.
He also talks about the importance of discernment.
Yes, that's crucial. He says we need to seek guidance through scripture and through prayer. We need to really think about the best way to help in each specific situation. Because sometimes the most loving thing to do might not be what we initially think it is.
And ultimately, it comes down to individual conscience, right?
Yeah.
Each person making their own decision based on their own beliefs.
Exactly. He talks about Paul's concept of willingness and cheerfulness in giving. He's saying that people will have different reasons for their choices, and that's okay. We all have our own unique journey.
So we've covered a lot today. We've really delved into the impact of the earthquake in Myanmar, the devastation, the ongoing conflict, the challenges of providing aid, and we've also explored these really profound questions about what it means to show love and compassion in the face of such immense suffering.
And we've seen how faith can play such an important role in those situations, both in providing comfort and in inspiring action.
I'm really struck by the resilience of those communities, even amidst all the challenges they face. And I'm also challenged by Pastor Lumaf's call to examine our own hearts and to ask ourselves how we can best respond to suffering in the world.
That's a really powerful question. So for our listeners, I would leave you with this. In a world where we see so much hardship, both natural and man-made, how do you choose to act? How do you find those meaningful ways to extend compassion and support? It's something worth thinking about even after this conversation ends.
It is. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.